to this live podcast on Twitch where you can find the news from the research industry that how our researchers keep on researching on various topics and domains to keep our lifestyle more useful and better, of course. And yes, these articles are posted on our website named postscientist.com. If you are willing to check it out, please check it out. Otherwise, listening to this podcast will be enough for you guys because it acts like an archive on the daily basis, providing you the information from the research industry. So without wasting any further time, let's get started with the first topic of the day is a new system that could improve robot navigation in uneven terrains. As mobile robots become more advanced, they also become easier to deploy in a wide range of real world settings. One of the factors that will enable their large scale implementation is the ability to autonomously move around within different types of environments. So far, many mobile robots have achieved promising results in navigating simple environments, particularly with a smooth floor or terrain in the real world. However, many environments, including industrial plants, some roads, and natural environments, have uneven terrains with holes or bumps in the ground, cluttered, and other obstacles. Researchers at the Russian Academy of Science and the National Research University Higher School of Economics in Moscow have recently developed a new navigation system that could improve the ability of mobile robots to move on rough surfaces while also avoiding different types of obstacles. This system, presented in a paper pre-published on Arziv, could help to facilitate the deployment of robots in more complex and cluttered environments with uneven terrains. Safe navigation in uneven terrains is an important problem in robotic research. Stephen Dergachev, critical Modawave, and Constant Yuklov wrote in the paper, we propose a 2.5D navigation system which consists of elevation map building, path planning, and local path following with obstacle avoidance. For local path following, we use the model predictive path integral MPPI control method. The robot navigation system proposed by Darashev and his colleagues is based on MPPI, an algorithm to optimize and correct a non-linear paths introduced by researchers at the Georgia Institute of Technology in 2016. For the purpose of their study, the team adapted this algorithm so that it would be suitable for optimizing path in environments with uneven terrains using 2.5D elevation maps. We use a logical elevation map as an input for MPPI algorithm. Darchev and his colleagues explained in the paper MPPI is guided by terrain transversability values computed by elevation map. These transferability values are computed from slope, steepness, surface roughness, and other parameters. Darchev and his colleagues evaluated their navigation system in a series of tests on simulated environment using three different elevation maps. In this test, the robots had to reach a specific location while overcoming or circumventing three distinct obstacles in its way, namely a truncated cone, a ramp, and some pits. The simulator environment used in this test were created using the Gatsby simulator and were characterized by different obstacles and types of uneven terrain. The researcher tested their system effectiveness in this environment using a model of a four-wheeled differential drive robot. Darchev and his colleague found that their system performed remarkably well in their simulation with the robot successfully circumventing obstacles and navigating uneven terrains almost 100% of the time. To confirm its potential, however, the team will eventually also need to test in a real world setting using a physical robot. If the system also performs well in a real environment, it could eventually be adapted and used in further research. Ultimately, it could thus promote the development of mobile robots that are better at navigating environments with uneven terrains. In the future, we plan to create a more efficient implementation of MPPI algorithm by parallelizing computation using CUDA and OpenCL toolkits. The researcher concluded in their paper another area of future work will be increasing on the robustness of MPPI and adapting it to a larger class of dynamic systems. Hmm. So there is a new system came in the market that would increase the efficiency level of the robot in uneven terrain. So, yep, these are the researcher names. These are the findings which is given by this researcher, of course. Moving on towards the next topic. Sorry, guys. I mean, my computer is lagging so much. So, yep. Never mind. Okay, let's read it. Researchers want to make salt printing marketable. Okay. Let's see. Interesting. Material scientists Nicola Klager and Simona Feldman have developed 3D printing process for creating salt template that they can fill with other materials. One area of application is the creation of highly porous, lightweight metal components. The two pioneer fellows are now trying to transfer their process to industry. Not that long ago, material researchers scored a coup. They used a 3D printer to create a framework out of salt. When they then filled with liquid magnesium, after the lightweight metal had cooled and hardened, the researcher leached out the salt framework, resulting in an object made of highly porous magnesium that would be suitable, for example, as a biodegradable bone impact implant. Original technology successfully enhanced. Now, the lead author of the study, Nicole Clagger, and a former master student, Simona Feldman, have published another paper in the journal Advanced Materials. In it, they report that, together with an interdisciplinary team, they have refined and modified this process to produce more complex salt scaffolds with even finer pores instead of using an extrusion based printer that prints out thin filaments of salt paste in a grid-like pattern from a fine nozzle. The research led by Klegler and Feldman used a stereolithography device and an ink based on salt particles. By mixing the ink with suitable monomers, the scientists made it light sensitive. This means that once exposed to light, the monomers combine to form hard polymers during the process. This makes it possible to build complex structures layer by layer. The salt framework created in this way then serves as a mold or a negative template to be filled with another material. In the next step of this novel process, the material scientists then filled the prefabricated structure not just with magnesium but also with aluminum, plastic, or wrapped it with carbon composite material instead. Their new technique let the researchers produce much more complex objects and also reduce the pore size from 0.5 millimeters to 0.1 millimeters. From basic research into practice, this work is set to go beyond purely academic. Clegg and Feldman began a pioneer fellowship in early July. They have 1 year to demonstrate if it's possible to commercialize the technology. We want to find out if the process can pass the test of real world use. Clegg says her business partner is equally keen to ensure that the lab results don't simply gather dust in a drawer. It's important for me to always have an application in mind as that keeps me motivated, Feldman says. For use in JAWS and in space, the two researchers already have several specific ideas for commercializing this process. One possible application is jaw implants. If one loses a tooth, the jaw bone underneath disintegrates very quickly. Clegg explains. Before a dental implant can be inserted, the bone must first be rebuilt. Surgeons currently do this using bone material from their hip, but that requires a second surgical site. Alternatively, they could opt for customized bone implants made of magnesium alloys into which bone forming cells can migrate and which will degrade over time. Clegg and Feldman could use this process to produce precisely this type of implant. An idea that heads in a similar direction is to produce three-dimensional scaffold for cells cultures. Cells don't have in the same way in 3D space as they do on a 2D plane, such as a standard laboratory petri dish. With this in mind, the researchers have contacted scientists who work with such cell cultures in the lab. It isn't yet clear whether their scientists would prefer to produce such a scaffold themselves using Clegg and Feldman process, or whether they would instead opt to buy the scaffold ready to use. The two young entrepreneurs see another possible implication in space travel on space mission. Weight is money, Clegg says, because every gram counts. Lightweight metal components manufactured using the process would be ideal for use in spaceships or rockets. Customization, not mass production. However, one thing is already clear to those two Pioneer Fellows: the product will not be cheap mass produced items, but rather relatively expensive mass customized products. This is because the manufacturing process is rather slow and doesn't allow very large batches to be produced in a short time. We are not going to position ourselves in the mass market, Feldman says. They have to yet to make a final decision regarding their business model. We are currently analyzing the market to find out who our potential customers are and what they really need, Claggett explained. They have already had countless discussions with dentists and cell biologists and also with companies that manufacture printing equipment. Steep learning curve in business. What we are doing now in is in some areas very different to my doctoral project, and the learning curve is corresponding steep, Clegger says with a smile. Feynman adds, we are getting a lot of new input, and we have to approach things differently from how we do in research. That's enriching and exciting. The two women are also receiving startup help from each professor Andrew Stoddart, in whose complex material groups they did their research. Among the things he will provide them with in the coming year are a laboratory workplace and printing equipment. We are delighted that can continue to work here for a while, Clark says. Moreover, they will be in position to benefit from the experience of the start of other startup founders from Stuttgart groups. We are in close contact with all four companies that have emerged from the group so far. Clark says they have also come up with a name for the startup, Salia, and a portmanteau of salt leaching. So the process they want to bring to market has given the young company its name. At some point they will apply for the label of ETH spin-off, but for now there is still a lot of development work to be done, and then the two pioneer fellows will see whether their successful research works turns into a profitable company. Hmm. Okay, great. So, okay, I mean, great findings, great research, and of course, salt printing in the market. I mean, nice. It's going to be used in very various application, of course, and I mean, okay. I guess I have no any inputs about this topic, so let's leave it and get into uh, moving on towards next topic. Scientist discovers possible target for treating and preventing osteo osteoarthritis. Okay, where and tear on joints can lead to inflammation, breakdown of cartilage, and development of osteoarthritis. Scientists at UF Scripps Biomedical Research have found a possible new target to find this painful cascade. In a study published Thursday in the journal PLOS One, bioscientist, sorry, biochemist Patrick Griffin, PhD, and colleagues M.I. Rang Chang, PhD, describe a specific protein that manage activities within chondrocytes, a critical cell type that maintains healthy cartilage in joints. As people age and stretch their joints, their chondrocytes begin to fail. The UF Scripps team found that activating a specific protein in these cells called ROD beta and could restore multiple factors needed for smooth joints to healthier levels, helping to control inflammation. Activating ROD beta could thus prevent a useful new strategy to prevent or delay development of the degenerative joint disease osteoarthritis, said Griffin, a professor of molecular medicine and scientific director of UF scripts biomedical research. People need an osteoarthritis medication that addresses the root cause of cartilage damage and depletion, as there currently are no disease modifying drugs for what is the number one cause of disability in the United States, Griffin said. While our work is in the early stages, our study suggests that the nuclear receptor rod beta could present a novel therapeutic target to protect cartilage damage and perhaps turn on cartilage regeneration. Rod beta, short for retionic acid receptor related orphan receptor beta, is a type of protein called a nuclear receptor. Inner cell genes switch between periods of activity and inactivity. When nuclear receptor bind to DNA, that activates the cell process of transcribing genes into proteins. Rod beta has been linked to development of the eye retina during fetal growth, and it can influence circadian rhythms by controlling genes. But its role in maintaining cartilage health was unclear. Griffin has studied cause of bone disease for many years. He zeroed in one or rod beta for several reasons. While few studies have been focused on this receptor, some had shown correlation between the receptor activity and bone loss. So he and Chang set out to better understand it, and Chang engineered cell engines to enable the studies. To our surprise, the gene program un upregulated by increase in rod beta activity as is supportive of the formation of chondrocytes, anti-inflammatory and protective against cartilage degradation, Chang said. Griffin said the team has launched additional study because of the enormous need for osteoarthritis solution. The United States, an estimated 32 million people live with their painful condition. The study suggests rod beta could be an attractive therapeutic target. However, there's much more we need to unravel. Griffin said specifically, we want to understand more about the mechanism by which rod beta impacts chondrocytes and blunts the inflammatory signal that lead to cartilage destruction. Hmm. Okay. So these are the I mean findings given by our scientists to prevent osteoarthritis in the bone itself, of course. So, yep. Moving on towards next topic. Study find unexpected protective properties of pain. Okay, let's see. Pain has been long recognized as one of the evolution's most reliable tools to detect the presence of harm and signal that something is wrong, an alert system that tells us to pause and pay attention to our bodies. But what if pain is more than just a mere alarm bell? What if pain is in it itself a form of protection? A new study led by researchers at Harvard Medical School said that may well be the case in the mice. The research published October 14 in Cell shows that pain neurons in the mouse gut regulate the presence of protective mucus under normal conditions and stimulate intestinal cells to release more mucus during state of inflammation. The work detailed the step of a complex signaling cascade, showing that pain neurons engage in direct crosstalk with mucus containing gut cells known as goblet cells. It turns out that pain may protect us in more direct ways than its classic job to detect potential harm and dispatch signals to the brain. Our work shows how pain meditating nerves in the gut talk to nearby epithelial cells that line the intestines, said study senior investigator Isaac Chu, associate professor of immunobiology in the Baltwinick Institute at HMS. This means that the nervous system has a major role in the gut beyond just give us a unpleasant sensation, that it's a key player in gut barrier maintenance and a protective mechanism during inflammation. A direct conversation. Our intestines and airway are stirred with goblet cells named for their cup like appearance. Goblet cells contain gel-like mucus made of protein and sugars that acts as protective coating that shields the surface of organ from abrasion and damage. The new research found that intestinal goblet cell release protective mucus when triggered by direct interaction with pain-sensing neurons in the gut. In a set of experiments, researchers observed that mice lacking pain neurons produce less protective mucus and experience changes in their intestinal microbial composition and imbalance in beneficial harmful microbes known as dysbiosis. To clarify just how this protective crosstalk occurs, the research analyzed the behavior of goblet cells in the presence and in the absence of pain neurons. They found that the surface of goblet cells contain a type of receptor called RAM1 that ensure the cells can respond to adjacent pain neurons, which are activated by dietary and microbial signals as well as mechanical pressure, chemical irritation, or drastic changes in temperature. The experiment further showed that the receptor connect with a chemical called CGRP released by nearby pain neurons. When the neurons are stimulated, these RAM1 receptors, the researcher found, are also present in both human and mouse goblet cells, thus rendering them responsive to pain signals. Experiment further showed that the presence of certain gut microbes activated the release of CGRP to maintain gut homeostasis. These findings tell us that these nerves are triggered not only by acute inflammation but also at baseline. Chu said, just having regular gut microbes around appears to tickle the nerves and cause the goblet cells to release mucus. This feedback loop, Chu said, ensure that microbes signal to neurons. Neurons regulate the mucus. The mucus help gut microbes healthy. In addition to microbial presence, dietary factors also played a role in activating pain receptors, the study showed. When a researcher gave mice capsaicin, the main ingredient in chili peppers, known for their ability to trigger intense acute pain, the mice pain neurons got swiftly activated, causing goblet cells to release abundant amounts of protective mucus. By contrast, mice lacking either pain neurons or goblet cell receptor for CGRP were more susceptible to colitis, a form of gut inflammation. The findings could explain why people with gut dysbiosis may be more prone to colitis. When researchers gave pain signaling CGRP to animals lacking pain neurons, the mice experienced rapid improvement in mucus production. The treatment protected mice against colitis even in the absence of pain neurons. The finding demonstrated that CGRP is a key instigator of the signaling cascade that leads to the secretion of protective mucus. Pain is a common symptom of chronic inflammatory condition of the gut, such as colitis, but our study shows that acute pain plays an important productive role as well, said study first author Dapping Yang, a postdoctoral research in the Chew lab. A possible downside to suppressing pain. The team experiment showed that mice lacking pain receptor also had worse damage from colitis when it occurred. Given that pain medication are often used to treat patients with colitis, it may be important to consider the possible dietary detrimental consequence of blocking pain, the researcher said. In people with inflammation of the gut, one of the major symptoms is pain, so you might think that we did want to treat and block the pain to alleviate suffering, Chu said, but some part of this pain signal could be directly productive as a neural reflex, which raises important question about how to carefully manage pain in a way that does not lead to other harms. Additionally, a class of common migraine medication that suppresses the secretion of CGRP may damage gut barrier tissues by interfering with this protective pain signaling, the researcher said. Given that CGRP is a mediator of goblet cell function and mucus production, if we are chronically blocking this protective mechanism in people with migraine, and if they are taking this medication long term, what happens, you said? Are the drugs going to interfere with mucosal lining and people microbiomes? Goblet Cells have multiple other functions in the gut. They provide a passage for antigens proteins found on viruses and bacteria that initiate a protective immune response by the body, and they produce antimicrobial chemicals that protect the gut from pathogens. One question that arises from our recent work is whether pain fibers also regulate this other function of globular cells, Yang said. Another line of injury, Yang added, would be to explore disruption in the CGRP signaling pathway and determine whether malfunction are at play in patients with genetic predisposition to inflammatory bowel disease. Okay, okay. Moving on towards next topic, researcher confirms unique danger of postpartum breast cancers. Okay, let's see. Breast cancer that emerge within 5 years of giving birth are merely likely to spread and become deadly. Additionally, a new study showed that recent childbirth alone is an independent risk factor for breast cancer progression. The findings suggest that the current clinical guidelines, which don't factor in postpartum status, are less able to accurately predict the risk of cancer recurrence and guide optimal treatment strategies in young patients. This has profound implications for prognosis, and said a senior author, Pepper Sechdin, PhD professor of cell development and cancer biology in the OHSU School of Medicine and OHSU Knight Cancer Institute. A postpartum diagnosis can move women who appear to have good prognosis with a high risk category. A paper describing the uh, research published today in JAMA Network Open OHS United Cancer Institute scientists Zhen Zhang, PhD MPH, and Solange Basil, MS, are co-first authors. The researchers were able to confirm the link between pregnancy and breast cancer outcomes using the extensive UTA population database in collaboration with Ken Smith, PhD co-senior author of the paper and a distinguished professor of family studies and population science at the University of Utah Huntsman Cancer Institute. The database combines state-wide birth and death records, Utah Cancer Registry data, and the patient record from statewide inpatient and ambulatory records. The final study include 2,970 subjects with breast cancer diagnosed at age 45 or younger, include 860 who never experienced childbirth. Those who had given birth were categorized based on time from a most recent delivery, diagnosed within less than 5 years, 5 to less than 10 years, or 10 years or longer from childbirth. The risk of metastasis, cancer spreading to other organs, was 50% higher among those diagnosed within 5 years of giving birth, as was the risk of breast cancer specific death compared with those who had not given birth, and this increased risk of metastasis and death were independent of tumor stage or estrogen receptor status, factors used now to judge how aggressive a cancer is likely to be and to decide which treatments are appropriate. Breast cancer that don't have estrogen receptors, known as ER negative tumors, are generally considered more dangerous than ER positive tumors, but in the study population, the proportion of women who progressed was the same in ER negative and ER positive tumors. The primary risk factor for progression to metastasis was not ER status, but rather a breast cancer diagnosis within 5 years of childbirth. That does not fit with everything we thought we knew about ER negative disease, Skenston said. In earlier research, Skenston and his colleague discovered how changes in the breast after childbirth can alter the development of breast cancer. At the end of lactation, most of the milk secreting cells undergo programmed cell death in a process called involution. It is an inflammatory process that resembles wound healing, and in study using mouse models, Skinner lab revealed how involution involution creates a tumor promoting environment using sample from breast cancer patients. The researcher found evidence that could involu- involution leaves a lasting imprint in the pattern of gene activity in breast tissue that could help tumors metasta- metastasize. Skinner's team has also shown in the mouse studies that as the liver recovers from the demands of pregnancy and lactation, it becomes an inviting landing spot for escaping cancer cells to take root and grow. Similar processes appear to occur in women's liver after childbirth. The new study found high rates of metastasis to the liver among those diagnosed within 5 years of childbirth. It's a two-hit problem, Skinner said. Innovation causes early tumor cells to get out of the breast and those cancer cells from the liver to be a great host to establish metastatic tumors. Factoring in postpartum status should help clinicians make a more accurate prediction about breast cancer aggressiveness and guide treatment decisions, such as the need of chemotherapy after surgery to remove tumors. The knowledge might even enable new and more effective treatment strategies, Skinner said. Knowing that postpartum cases show a distinct signature of gene expression, it may be possible to develop treatment that specifically target signaling pathways active in postpartum cancers. Okay. Moving on to this next topic. Analyzing a new material that promises faster, higher resolution displays. Okay. A new material is said to provide us with faster and higher resolution displays. Hokkaido University research explained that makes this material so special, opening the door to its application and further development. All display consists of a lattice of tiny dots of light called pixels, the brightness of which can be individually controlled. The total number of pixels and therefore the resolution and display size is limited by how many of these pixels can be addressed within a given fraction of a second. Therefore, display manufacturers try in the pixel control units to use material that exhibit a very high electron mobility, which is a measure for how quickly current will start to flow through a control unit as it responds to voltage being applied, and thus how quick the pixel is. A new material called ITZO from or its constituent elements indium, tin, zinc, and oxygen promises to be up to 7 times faster than the current state of the art material. However, it has not been clear where this improvement comes from, hampering this adoption for industrial application. Hokkaido University material scientist Hiromichi Ota and his team used a unique measurement technique to clarify this point in the research. In the recent paper published in the journal ACS Applied Electronic Materials, they showed that the higher electron mobility results from the unusual fact that it's so films of sufficient thickness, free charges accumulate at the interface with the carrier material and thus enable passing through electrons to travel through the bulk of the material unhindered. The unique ability comes down to a very simple formula. The electron mobility is proportional to the free travel time of the charge carrier's electron in the case divided by the effective mass. And while the measurement of the electron mobility itself is a relative standard technique, effective mass and free travel time cannot be measured as easily, and therefore it is difficult to tell what factor is responsible for the electron mobility. but by measuring how the electric field inside the material changes in response to an applied magnetic field as well as to temperature gradient, OTA team could reduce the effective mass of the electrons and then calculate the free travel time as well. It turns out that both the effective mass is significantly smaller than in current state of the art materials and the free travel time is much higher, and therefore both factors contribute to the higher electron mobility. In addition, by observing how the results depending on the thickness of the ITZU material, they could reduce how the interface and bulk of the material contribute to those effects. Ota explained the significance of this analysis using the knowledge we gained from the study. We may in the future design other transparent oxide, semiconductor, thin film transistor, and different chemical composition that exhibit even better electron mobility properties. Thus, the study is a major step towards the next generation of ultra high resolution displays. Okay. So, these are the findings given by our scientists, of course, on the material to analyze faster in comparison to other materials. So, yep. And the material name is ITZO. So, yeah. Moving on to our next topic. It's going, yes, sorry. It's going to be used in various application, many of the manufacturing and uh, in new appliances, new devices. So, it's a great thing for us, of course. Moving on to our next topic. Too much motivation affects our decision making. Okay, let's see. In a good or bad mood, focused or distracted, our internal state directly influences our perception and decision making. While the role of motivation on the performance of behavioral tasks has been known for more than a century thanks to the work of psychologists Robert Yerkes and John Tilghman Dodson, its precise effect on the brain remains unclear. A team from the University of Geneva, UNIGE, in collaboration with the EPFL, has revealed how motivation alters the neural circuits responsible for sensory perception preceding decision making in mice. The study reveals a high level of motivation that it is too high or too low can affect our perception and therefore our choices. These results featured in the journal Neuron open up new perspectives in learning methods. Going to work early in the morning, choosing a restaurant at lunchtime, many of our decisions are motivated by needs such as earning a living or satisfying our hunger. However, decision making is a complex process which can also be influenced by external factors such as the environment or other individuals and by our internal states such as our mood, our level of attention, or our degree of motivation. The laboratory of Sami L. Botsani, assistant professor in the Department of Basic Neuroscience at the Faculty of Medicine of the UNIGE, and the recipient of an Excellenza Fellowship SNSF is studying the neural circuits involved in decision making. In recent work carried out in collaboration with the professor Carl Peterson team at EPFL, his lab has studied the role played by a specific internal state motivation and in perception and decision making. For more than a century, it has been known that a relationship between motivation and performance exists thanks to the work of American psychologist Robert Yerkes and John Diglum Dodson. Too much or too little motivation is detrimental to performance. However, the way in which this impacts our neural circuits remains unclear. We wanted to observe how sensory information transmitted by neurons in the cortex is altered by the degree of motivation and to what extent the latter can have an effect on learning and performance in an decision making task, explains Sami L. Botsani, the lead author of the study. The research team developed a behavioral paradigm involving mice in a controlled water consumption regime. The first trained those rodents to respond to tactile stimuli via two whiskers A and B and to produce an action licking a spout only for whiskers A in order to obtain a drop of water. Following this training, the mice reacted mainly to the simulation of whiskers A, thus indicating their ability to discriminate between these two sensations. Finally, the researcher conducted these experiments at decreasing levels at first in order to vary the motivation of the rodents to participate in the task. State of hyper motivation blurs sensory information. In a state of a great thirst, therefore of great motivation, rodents perform poorly. They licked the spout indiscriminately without distinguishing between the whiskers simulated. In contrast, in a state of moderate thirst, the choice of their action become optimal. They mainly licked the spout when whisker A was simulated. Finally, when they were not very thirsty, their performance in the task dropped again. By observing the activity of neuronal populations responsible for perceptual decision making in these mice, the researcher discovered the neurons in the circuit were flooded with the electrical signal when mice were hypermotivated. Conversely, in a state of low motivation, the signal were too weak. Hypermotivation leads to strong stimulation of cortical neurons, which cause a loss of precision in the perception of tactile stimuli, says Giulio Matteucci, a postdoctoral fellow in Sami L. Bozzani laboratory and the study first authored. In contrast, in the low motivation state, the accuracy of the sensory information was recovered, but the strength of the signal was too low for it to be transferred correctly. As a result, the perception of the stimuli was also impaired. A new understanding of learning. These results open up new perspectives. They provide a possible neural biases for the Yerkes-Dodson law. They also revealed that the level of motivation does not only impact decision making but also the perception of sensory information which leads to the decision, explains Carl Peterson, full professor of the Brain Mind Institute of EPFL and co-senior author in the study. This work also suggests that it is necessary to decouple acquisition and expression of new knowledge. We observed that mice understood the rule very quickly that could only express this learning much later, depending on an altered perception linked to the level of motivation. This unraveling of the rail of motivation in learning opens the way to new adaptive methods that aim to maintain an optimal level of motivation during learning. So these are the new motivation things, that how uh, too much motivation can also affect your decision making ability and how it's going to affect in the results of that work or that project. So I mean, uh, we need to stabilize those thing at yes, we need to be motivated to do a certain job, otherwise we can't get into motivation that it's the right thing, that my perspective is the right perspective for this project. So these are the things we need to of course triggered at this point to have motivation and stabilize that motivation. And yes, listening to other people perspective, because it's the people uh, the people around you or the scientists around you have many different perspectives of course, and the from those perspectives we need to uh, get the right perspective to get the job done. So that's the real part of the psychology thing, which I mean uh, which is which is useful for any of the project, for successful project of course. So yep, moving on towards next topic. Watching lithium in real time could improve performance for EV battery materials. Okay. Researchers have found that the irregular movement of lithium ions in next generation battery materials could be reducing their capacity and hindering their performance. The team led by University of Cambridge tracked the movement of lithium ions inside a promising new battery material in real time. It has been assumed that the mechanism by which lithium ions are stored in battery materials is uniform across the individual active particles. However, the Cambridge led team found that during the charge discharge cycle, lithium storage is anything but uniform. When the battery is near the end of its discharge cycle, the surface of the active particles becomes saturated by lithium while their cores are lithium deficit. This result in the loss of reusable lithium and a reduced capacity. The research could help improve existing battery materials and could accelerate the development of next generation batteries. The results are published in Joule. Electric vehicles (EVs) are vital in the transition to a zero carbon economy. Most electric vehicles on the road today are powered by lithium ion batteries due to in part to their higher energy density. However, as EV use becomes more widespread, the push for longer range and faster charging times means that current battery materials need to be improved and new materials need to be identified. Some of the most promising of these materials are state of the art positive electrode materials known as layered lithium nickel rich oxides, which are widely used in premium EVs. However, their working mechanism, particularly lithium ion transport under practical operating conditions, and how this is linked to the electrochemical performance, are not fully understood, and so we cannot yet obtain maximum performance for these materials. By tracking how light interacts with the active particle during battery operation under a microscope, the researcher observed distinct differences in lithium storage during the charge discharge cycle. In nickel rich manganese cobalt oxide (NMC). This is the first time that this is non uniformity in lithium storage has been directly observed in the individual particle, said co-first author Alice Merriweather from the Cambridge Yusuf Hamid Department of Chemistry. Real-time techniques like ours are essential to capture this while battery cycling. Combining the experimental observation with computer modeling, the researcher found that the non-uniformity originates from drastic changes to the rate of lithium-ion diffusion in NMC during the charge-discharge cycle. Specifically, lithium ions diffuse slow in fully lithiated NMC particles, but the diffusion is significantly enhanced once some lithium ions are extracted from these particles. Our model provides insight into the range over which lithium ion diffusion in NMC varies under the early stage of charging, and said co first author Dr. Shrindi Pandru Pandu Rangi from the Cambridge Department of Engineering. Our model predicted lithium distribution accurately and captured the degree of heterogeneity observed in experiments. These predictions are key to understanding other battery degradation mechanisms such as particle. Importantly, the lithium heterogeneity seen at the end of discharge establishes one reason why nickel rich cathode materials typically lose and 10% of their capacity after the first charge discharge cycle. This is significant considering one industrial standard that is used to determine whether a battery should be retired or not is when it has lost 20% of its capacity, said co-first author Dr. Sean Zhu from the Shanghai Tech University, who completed the research while based at Cambridge. Okay, great. So these are the findings on the lithium metal. Of course, the, it is used in our batteries in day-to-day lives nowadays. So it's useful for us to understand those things. So yep. Moving on to our next topic. Okay. Deep learning makes X-ray inception inspection. Deep learning makes X-ray CT insep- inspection of 3D printed parts faster, more accurate. A new deep learning framework developed at the Department of Energy Oak Ridge National Laboratory in speeding up the process of inspecting additively manufactured metal parts using X-ray computer tomography or CT while increasing the accuracy of the result. The reduced cost of time, labor, maintenance, and energy are expected to accelerate expansion of additive manufacturing or 3D printing. The scan speed reduces cost significantly, said ORNL lead researcher Ahmed Ziabari, and the quality is higher, so the post processing analysis becomes much simpler. The framework is already being incorporated into software used by commercial partners. Yes, within its machines at DOE manufacturing demonstration facility at ORNL, where companies hone 3D printing methods. ORNL researcher had previously developed technology that can analyze the quality of a part while it is being printed, adding a high level of imaging accuracy after printing provides an additional level of trust in additive manufacturing while potentially increasing production. With this, we can inspect every single part coming out of 3D printing machines, said Pradeep Bhattad, Z's business development manager for additive manufacturing. Currently, CT is limited by prototyping, but this one tool can propel additive manufacturing toward industrialization. X-ray CT scanning is important for certifying the soundness of a 3D printed part without damaging it. The process is similar to medical X-ray CT. In this case, an object set inside a cabinet is slowly rotated and scanned at each angle by powerful X-rays. Computer algorithms use the resulting stack of two-dimensional projections to construct a 3D image showing the density of the object. Internal structured X-ray CT can be used to detect defects, analyze failures, or certify that a product matches the intended composition and quality. However, X-ray CT is not used at large scale in additive manufacturing because current methods of scanning and analysis are time intensive and imprecise. Metals can totally absorb the lower energy X-rays in the X-ray beam, creating image inaccuracies that can further multiplied if the object has a complex shape. Creating image inaccuracy that can further multiply if the object has a complex shape. The resulting flaws in the image can obscure cracks or pores the scan is intended to reveal. A trained technician can correct for these problems during analysis, but the process is time and labor intensive. Zebra and his team developed deep learning framework that rapidly provides a clear, more accurate reconstruction and an automated analysis. He will present the process his team developed during the Institute of Electrical and Electronics Engineers International Conference on Image Processing in October. Training a supervised deep learning network for CT usually requires many expensive measurements because metal parts pose additional challenges. Getting the appropriate training data can be difficult. Zebra approach provides a leap forward by generating realistic training data without requiring extensive experiment to gather it. A generative adversarial network or GAN method is used to synthetically create a realistic looking data set for training a neural network, leveraging physics based simulation and computer aided design. GAN is a class of machine learning that utilizes neural networks competing with each other as in a game. It has really been used for practical application like this, Zebra said. Because this X-ray city framework needs scan with fewer angles to achieve accuracy, it has reduced imaging time by a factor of 6. Zebra said from about an hour to 10 minutes or less, working that quickly with so few viewing angles would normally add significant noise to the 3D image. But the ordinal algorithm taught on the training data corrects this, even enhancing small flow detection by a factor of 4 or more. The framework developed by Zebra team would allow manufacturers to rapidly fine-tune their builds even while changing design or material. With this approach, sample analyzing analysis can be completed in a day instead of 6 to 8 weeks, Buttard said. If I can very rapidly inspect the whole part is very cost effective way, then we have 100% confidence, he said. We are partnering with ORNL to make city an accessible and reliable industry inspection tool. ORNL researchers evaluated the performance of the new framework on hundreds of samples printed with different scan parameters using complicated dense materials. These results were good, and ongoing trials at MDF are working to verify that the technique is equally effective with any type of metal alloy, Bhattad said. That's important because the approach developed by Zebri team could make it far easier to certify parts made from a new metal alloys. People don't use novel materials because they don't know the best printing parameters. Zebra said, now if we can characterize these materials so quickly and optimize the parameter, that would help move these novel material into additive manufacturing. In fact, Zebedia said the technology can be applied in many fields, including defense, auto manufacturing, aerospace, and electronics printing, as well as non destructive evaluation of electric vehicle batteries. Okay. So, I mean, it's being well described by the author itself, so no need of any input from myself. So, moving on to our next topic. Okay, let's see. Expert discuss future surplus power storage technologies. If the transition to renewables is to succeed, we will need a valuable means of storing surplus heat and electricity. Globe spoke to experts from ETH Zurich uh, about the promising technologies that could help us to reach net zero. Switzerland aims to transition to a net zero energy system by 2050. To meet this goal, it will need to replace fossil fuels with renewables. The Swiss government has also taken the decision to phase out nuclear power. As a result, its plans for carbon neutrality will require not only the electrification of transport and heating by means of electric vehicles and heat pumps, but also measures to compensate for the loss of nuclear generating capacity to meet increased energy demand. Switzerland will primarily rely on hydro and photovoltaic energy sources and to a lesser extent wind power. But what about the times when the sun doesn't shine and the wind doesn't blow? The grid, sorry, the grid has to constantly smooth out fluctuations in renewable generation and match supply to demand, said Greblia Hug, a professor at the Power System Laboratory at ETH Zurich. Hug also heads on the ETH Energy Science Center's ESC, which recently released modeling showing that a renewable energy system is both technically feasible and economically viable. Also, obviously, it won't be simple. Hug acknowledges. And without effective energy storage, the transition to renewable won't even be possible. Of course, energy storage system stabilize the grid, providing the necessary capacity to offset the volatility of generation from renewable sources such as coal or wind and hydro. This require technologies that are able to efficiently convert electricity and heat into a form that can be stored and then released back into the grid when needed, whether on a seasonal or minute by minute basis. If Switzerland starts investing more in photovoltaics, it will end up generating more power than it needs at noon on a summer's day. To make that midday solar power available both day and night, it needs short-term storage solution. But Switzerland's biggest challenge is actually long-term storage, says Hug. The country already produces too little electricity in the winter and relies on import to cover increased demand, and this seasonal imbalance will only intensify as the transition to renewables gathers pace. Photovoltaic plants, in particular, generate surplus electricity in the summer, says Gianfranco Giordate, an expert in energy system modeling at the ESC. But in the winter, the sun is weaker and the heat pumps are keeping people homes warm. That's what we see a gap between energy supply and demand. The key question of Switzerland is how to store this excess solar power from the summer to the winter. With demand for storage system clearly growing, Hug argues that the safest approach is to invest both in established and emerging technology. We still haven't come up with the perfect energy storage solution, yet energy and storage shouldn't be seen as an end in itself, says Giuditti. Giudetti. Switzerland's goals is to achieve net zero greenhouse gas emission by 2050. Storage is crucial, but it's not only the way to help us meet the goal. He believes we should tap into indirect methods of energy storage as well as physical storage capacity. We need to take a mixed approach, he says. The following sections present some of the methods that might feature in this mix: runoff river pumped storage as buffer reserves. Robert Bose, ETH professor of hydraulic engineering, sees hydropower as the backbone of the Swiss electricity system. Hydro is our most important green energy asset, making up about 60% of our renewable generation. Its ability to store power also plays a key role in our net zero strategy. Runoff river hydropower plants channel water directly into electricity generating turbines to supply renewable base load power. This kind of plants have no storage function, unlike reservoir plants, which can store water to provide flexible generating capacity on demand. The large reservoirs in the Alps primarily serve as a form of seasonal energy storage. The rain and melt water they collect in the spring and summer can be used to generate electricity in the winter, said Boyce. Yet, however much power these large lakes generate, they are still unable to store any of it. Only pump storage plants have the ability to store electricity. They do this by pumping water from a lower to an upper reservoir and then emptying the upper reservoir through the turbines to generate electricity on demand. Currently, hydroelectric pumped storage is the only proven technology for the capture and release of large amounts of electricity. It's offered a powerful and flexible storage capabilities and makes it the perfect choice for balancing the day-to-day and day-night variability of photovoltaic power generation. Nonetheless, its capacity does not stretch far enough to resolve seasonal variations in electricity generation. One way to reduce the winter energy gap is to build more reservoirs, but this approach is controversial. Such projects often run counter to nature conservation goals and meet resistance. I don't think this option shows much promise, said Boyce. Hydropower is a mature and very efficient technology, but not enough attention has been paid to environmental experts such as responsible water management. Researchers at ETH Zurich Laboratory of Hydraulics and Hydrology and Glacio, Glaciology, WAV, VAW, are currently seeking way to make hydropower more eco-friendly. Examples include improved bypass tunnels for sediment and fish ladders to steer fish safely past reservoir inlets and turbines. Hydropower won't gain widespread acceptance until it does more to protect biodiversity, said Boyce. Decentralized small scale storage In the grid itself, batteries can act as a kind of miniature pumped storage unit. If we have more decentralized system generating electricity on people rooftops, in the future we will need distributed small scale storage device to perform local network balancing. Much like pumped storage systems, batteries can be used to rapidly balance generation and demand. Because battery size can be easily tuned to the application, they are suitable for use as decentralized energy storage device in buildings, said ETH Professor Vanessa Wood. When combined with photovoltaic panels, batteries can take pressure off the grid by offering local storage of excess electricity for a matter of minutes or hours. If all the solar power generated at peak in residential areas were to be fed to the limited number of pumped storage hydropower plants in the mountains, however, this could lead to bottlenecks in the grid. In the rapidly evolving battery market for homes and electric vehicles, the latest development include the first community scale batteries designed to balance short term power fluctuation on a neighborhood level. The next key step is to make batteries even more efficient so that they can complete more charge cycles before losing performance, says Wood, who conducts research to understand the limitation of exciting batteries and demonstrate novel battery concepts. At the same time, we must find substitutes of problematic raw materials and develop method to recycle batteries at low cost without using too much energy. Researchers all over the world are already working on solution seasonal thermal energy storage. In an ideal energy system, we would use surplus solar power produced in summer to meet the increased demand for heating in winter. Storing large amounts of electricity over a period of several months is not yet financially viable. But there is one way of transferring summer sunshine to the winter months. Thermal energy storage, cost effective technologies is already available and it well established in countries such as Denmark, says Gyo. Yet, thermal energy storage remains a relatively neglected topic in Switzerland. Seasonal thermal energy storage stats technology captures heat in summer and releases it in winter. It requires large heat reservoirs such as basins, tanks, or water bearing layers underground. These store warm water that is heated in summer by means of heat pumps and surplus solar power. By shifting the production of heat to the summer months, stress system reduce electricity demand in the winter and help to reduce the energy gap. Gyo believes thermal energy storage will play an important role in Switzerland in the future. Storage in energy carriers. There is only one way to store electricity and and definitely, at least for the foreseeable future, if we ever reach a point in summer where we exhausted all the short-term storage options and still have surplus electricity available, says Qt, and then and only then should we consider converting it into a storable energy carrier. He is referring, of course, to the great hydrogen debate. The idea is to use excess power to electrolyze. Sorry, guys, I will be back in a minute. Yep. Okay. Let's start. There is only way to store electricity indefinitely. Sorry. The idea is to use excess power to electrolyze water into hydrogen and oxygen. The hydrogen could then be stored in a suitable form and converted back into heat and electricity in the winter by means of a gas turbine or fuel cells. Alternatively, the hydrogen could be combined with captured CO2 to produce synthetic methane. This not only has a high energy density but can also be fed directly into the existing gas grid. But one additional step is all it takes to obtain carbon neutral liquid fuels for aviation or shipping. As yet, none of these methods are established, and many are not financially valuable. Of course, says Hug, synapses, sign gases uh, could certainly serve as long-term storage medium for solar power produced in summer, but most of these methods used to convert them back into heat and electricity are inefficient. The most effective way to use excess electricity is to shift it directly into some other channel, like charging electric vehicles, says Hug. Nevertheless, she considers sand fuels viable for applications that are difficult to electrify, gravity batteries and compressed air energy storage. When it comes to short term energy storage, pumped storage, hydropower plants, and batteries are not the only option. Gravity batteries store potential energy and then convert it into electricity, much like pumped storage system, but instead of using water they store potential storage in a mass that is raised and lowered by a crane. For example, a compressed air energy storage system are another alternative through a slightly less efficient 1. The work by pumping air into a reservoir or vessel to produce compressed air. This can then be used to drive a gas turbine to quickly compensate for load imbalance in the grid. Although a certain amount of heat is lost during compression, most of the heat produced can be recovered by storing and making it available again when unloading. A more efficient but also more expensive option is a flywheel. These are closer to batteries in terms of capacity, but they store energy in the form of rotational kinetic energy for just a few minutes at a time. Once again, to help stabilize power grids, smart power networks, all the researchers are keen to emphasize that physical storage systems are not the only option. There are also other approaches that act indirectly like storage and help make the system more flexible. For example, digitalized and automated power grids could monitor generation and consumption in real time to make the best use of available resources. In the future, smart grid control will enable us to operate power network closer to the maximum limits, says grid expert Hug. If done successfully, this will make the system more efficient and reduce the need of the operating reserves. Demand must also become more flexible so that we can make the most of the electricity available at any given in time. Smart load management can help reduce the need to store electricity, says Gudity, citing the example of e-mobility. Electric vehicles are mobile batteries that can help absorb peaks in photovoltaic generation in the daytime. This requires charging stations to be developed in locations where vehicles typically spend the day, such as workplaces, car parks, and parking spaces close to the city center. Imported energy. According to the ESC calculation, Switzerland will also need to expand its electricity production in winter, as well as building up hydropower reserves. This will also mean investing in alpine photovoltaic plants, geothermal power, as gas-fired power plants operating on biogas or syngas. Yet Hogg rejects the idea of self sufficiency because any attempt by Switzerland to meet all its own electricity needs would be both inefficient and hugely expensive. Switzerland will therefore continue to generate less electricity than it needs, which will mean a continuing dependency on imported energy. Our models show that a secure and affordable energy system also required a smooth and effective power transfer to and nearby from nearby countries, says Hug. Unlike Switzerland, Northern Europe has plenty of electricity in winter because countries such as Denmark have invested heavily in wind power generation, which peaks in winter. Switzerland could therefore import wind power in winter and export solar power in the form of a pumped storage hydropower in summer to quickly correct load imbalances in the grid. This is a sensible approach because everyone benefits when countries balance out their different generating capacity through electricity trading. However, the lack of an electricity agreement makes cross border electricity trading with the EU difficult. That's why regulator across to the European electricity market would be such an important step for Switzerland, says Hug. If it is to make a successful transition to renewables, Switzerland will need not only a broad mix of technologies but also a blend of solutions ranging from decentralized energy production to international trading agreements. Okay. So, I mean, these are the analytic approach or of the analysis of the experts given of the surplus amount of energy in the form of electricity to supply the heat to the European countries or the European parts of the home. So yep, I mean, great for them, of course. So yep, moving on towards the next topic, the history of the semiconductor industry and why it is so critical and politically sensitive. Hmm. Semiconductor and the digital machinery that runs smartphone and computers and helps run everything from cars and doorbells to water and power supplies and military systems are ubiquitous, also called chips or integrated circuit. They are usually pieces of silicon with transistor etched in them. Transistor keep track of the ones and zeros that run all digital systems. Back in the late 1950s, getting four transistors to work on a small piece of silicon was a big accomplishment. The latest iPhone 14 processor has 16 billion transistors. With the United States has led the development of chips. Most are now fabricated outside the country. Taiwan and South Korea have cornered the market on building the most advanced chips. Through the US and China are trying to change that, having the world leading makers in political hot spots in a concern too. In this new book, Chip Ward, The Fight of the World Most Critical Technology, Chris Millard, an assistant professor of international history at the Fletcher School, tells the story of the semiconductor and the crucial role today. He covers the creation of the technology, the fears, competition in this industry, the uh, astounding scientific advances that propel chips into every aspect of our lives, and why the US and China both view them as critical to national security. Policymakers in Washington and Beijing increasingly realize that chips are fundamental to military power as well as crucial to driving the civilian economy, says Millard, who is also a Jean Kirkpatrick visiting fellow at the American Enterprise Institute this year. Tufts now spoke with the Miller to learn more about chips, their history, and why they are driving competition between the US and China. Tufts now, Gordon Moore of US chip powerhouse Intel predicted in 1970 that computing power would double every year or two, which came to pass. How important is that? Chris Miller, we have gotten exponential growth and power over the past 60 years. If you don't think about it, it doesn't sound that crazy. But what if the rest of the economy provided a doubling in power every 2 years? What if airplanes flew twice as fast every 2 years, or houses got twice as big every 2 years, or cars got half as expensive every 2 years? You realize that the rest of the economic life doesn't work that way. But that's the dynamic that provides a billion-fold increase in computing power over 60 years, which is what we have gotten. We have often take of granted that that's possible when in fact it's only of the most unique economic phenomena of modern times. You write extensively about the national security consequence of chip manufacturing. How has that changed over time? One of the constant Con- constants. One of the constants is that chips are crucially important for military systems. It was that way when chips were first invented in the 1950s to fit into missile guidance computers. Today, military systems are even more dependent on computing power or on memory, on signals processing. Of course, the US military is now like the rest of the world, reliant in many cases on Taiwan and South Korea to produce the chips. The defense networks need that created new challenges. The Pentagon has had to get comfortable with sourcing some of the most crucial technologies from other countries, which is not something they wanted to have to do. But right now, there are just no other options. As the US falls behind in certain chip making spheres, the question is whether China is going to advance in a way that gives China an advantage in technology, or at least closes the gap between the US and China in military terms. The US has always relied on its technology advances to undergird its military power. If that advantage degrades, that will have major ramification for military power. The US started out fabricating chips, but soon they were offshored mostly to East Asia. Why is that? It's cheaper generally to produce advanced chips in South Korea and Taiwan, and to some extent in China, because tax incentives in those countries are dramatically more generous, and environmental regulations are losers, and there are a lot of toxic chemicals needed in chip making. Labor costs are only a small part of the story. In general, it's easier to get permits to open a factory in Taiwan. Chips are 42% of exports in Taiwan. So if someone wants to open a chip factory, everyone going to make sure it happens. In the US, chips are important, but not nearly as important as in other countries. So we focus less on them, and permitting is harder. It it's also true that US firms that used to be leaders have in some cases screwed up in recent years. But the best example is Intel, which is the biggest US producer for of processor chips and used to the world most advanced in terms of technology. But it has had some real stumbles in the past half decade or so, and is now trying to recover from them. For example, it used to have the technological lead, but has fallen behind Taiwan Semiconductor Manufacturing Company. How did Taiwan Semiconductor Manufacturing Company TSMC end up with a 37% market share of logic chips, the ones that go in smartphone and computers? You have to give their corporate leadership a lot of credit. They have managed their company more effectively than any in the world, and they have a really smart business model. They were the first company to focus not on both designing and producing chips in house, but rather to slowly produce chips that were designed by other companies at the time. That was a radical innovation in the business model. As they grew in volume, they were able to hone their production processes thanks to the large volume that they were producing. The more chips you produce, the more you learn, the more cost effective factory production becomes. They have turned into a real juggernaut. Today, they produce more logic chips than anyone else by a pretty large margin. They have got They have got the most advanced technology. It's basically impossible to imagine the computing infrastructure we rely on, whether it's phone, computers, or data centers or cell phone towers, without TSMC. China considered Taiwan a re- renegade province and has threatened to invade it. Okay, okay. What would happen to the world supply of advanced chip in war broke out there? Okay, okay. The impact would be disastrous. Smartphone production would grind nearly to a halt. The numbers of pieces produced would fall dramatically. The important would be measured in the trillions of dollars. You write that in the 1980s, Japanese companies took over the memory chip business, and it seemed like they were well on their way to being top producer of all chips worldwide. But they stumbled badly in the 1990s and are not major chip producers now. Could the same thing happen to today's top producer Taiwan, South Korea, and China? Japan invested very heavily in memory chips in the late 70s and throughout the 80s, and they did very well in it. But they invested beyond the capacity the market needed and ended up with a lot of facility that were not very profitable. They spent the 90s trying to bring their chip industry back to the profitability and missed many key trends like personal computers. The most likely candidate for the Japan style rise and fall in China, which is pouring money into its chip industry and doing so in ways that are not economically efficient. There are substantial risk. That's a lot of the money China putting into its chip industry will end up being not commercially viable. The Russian military fighting in Ukraine seems to be at a disadvantage in advanced weaponry. How advanced is Russia in the chip technology field? Hmm. Russia has been a player in the chip production since the early days of the industry, but it always being a small player. It always relied on copying or smuggling foreign technology for its chip industry. Okay, that produce a problem today because military equipment is more dependent than ever on computing power. If you are take apart the guidance of computers of Russian missiles that have been acquired on a battlefield in Ukraine, you find that Russian missiles are full of American and South Korean and Taiwanese chips. Hmm. Because they smuggled in the Russia often using chips that are not perfectly suited for a given use case. One of the challenges that Russia faces is that it can produce enough and it can produce high quality guidance system for its munitions, which has been one of the many problems that it has faced in Ukraine. Okay, okay, okay. Moving on to our next topic. Okay, Meta calls FTC suit to block VR fitness deal ill convinced. Okay. Many if I mean, why am I laughing? Because uh, we have there is a news coming out, 2 or 3 days before that uh, Meta introduced a VR headset of around $15,000 in the market to see the market interaction with the VR headset, of course. So I mean, I given some of the inputs uh, in that podcast. So listen to that news and that input. So okay, let's read it and see that's what the Meta or own company suit to block the VR fitness deal and ill convinced. Okay, let's see. Meta Platform Incorporation urged a judge to reject the US Federal Trade Commission attempt to block the company acquisition of virtual reality app within Unlimited, saying the agency claims about competition in the area are based on pure speculation. Meta argued the FTC hasn't laid out the elements to show the deal announced in October 2021 would hurt potential competition in a still young VR fitness space, according to a court filing Thursday. The company argument to U.S. District Judge Edward Devlia follows the FTC move last week to narrow its rationale for, for blocking the deal. The FTC newly amend complaint drop allegation that Meta virtually a virtual reality game Beat Saber directly competes with within Supernatural fitness app. Supernatural is a subscription fitness service where user can out, work out or meditate to music in immersive environments. The FTC complaint, now called Beat Saber, on incidental fitness app and argues that before the accusation, Meta was likely to create its own dedicated fitness lab to compete with Within's offerings. Okay, virtual reality in Meta next big bet, as chief executive officer Mark Zuckerberg believes that people will want to spend time in a digital universe called the metaverse. Huh, I mean, right. The company previously bought Oculus, which makes VR headset acquisition like within are meant to add to the portfolio of experience for users, bringing them back repeatedly to Meta products and services. The Facebook parent featured within Supernatural multiple times during its annual product conference Monday and is making announcement on its behalf, saying that user, for example, will soon be able to add a knife strike movement. The FTC alleges that Meta would kill future competition in a new market, often referred to as nascent competition. A suit on these grounds is rare, given the difficulty in providing a deal would suppress the potential of a young industry. The last time the FTC brought such a case in a 2015 instance involving sterilization technology, the agency launched. The FTC attempts to fix its ill uh, conceived complaint still ignores the fact the law and the law relies on pure speculation of a hypothetical future state. A Meta spokesperson said in an email, there is a vibrant competition in the fitness space and across VR, and our acquisition of within will be good for people, developers, and the VR space. For this reason, the complaint should be dismissed. FTC chair Lena Khan has taken a more aggressive approach to antitrust enforcement than her predecessors. The agency sued July 27 to stop Meta purchase of within. Davila has scheduled a 2 week hearing in December on the FTC request for an injunction to block the deal. The judge can decide whether to rule on Meta motion to dismiss the case, schedule a separate hearing on the issue, or wait until the previously scheduled evidentiary hearing. Separately, the FTC filed a complaint against the merger in its in-house court, and administrative judge has scheduled a trial to start in January. Even if the injunction is dismissed or if Meta prevails before Davila, the agency could decide to proceed with its administrative process. Okay, okay. Right. Moving on to our next topic. New walking robot design could revolutionize how we build things in space. Okay. Researchers have designed a state-of-the-art walking robot that could revolutionize large construction projects in space. They tested the feasibility of the robot for the in-space assembly of a 25-meter large aperture space telescope. They present the finding in Frontiers in Robotics and AI. A scaled-down prototype of the robot also showed promise for large construction application on Earth. Maintenance and serving of large construction are now where more needed than in space, where the conditions are extreme and human technology has a short lifespan. Extra activities done by an astronaut outside a spacecraft, robotics and autonomous systems solution have been useful for serving and maintenance missions, have helped the space community conduct groundbreaking research on various space missions. Advancement in robotics and autonomous system facilitate a multitude on in space service. This includes but are not limited to manufacturing, assembly, maintenance, astronomy, earth observation and debris removal. With the country risk involved only rely With the country risk involved only relying on human builders is not enough, and current technologies are becoming outdated. We need to introduce sustainable futuristic technology to support the current and growing orbital ecosystem, explained corresponding author Manu Nair, PhD candidate at the University of Lincoln. As the scale of space mission grows, there is a need for more extensive infrastructure in orbit. Assembly missions in space would hold of the key responsibility in meeting the increasing demand. In the paper, Nair and his colleagues introduced an innovative gestures walking robotic systems that can be used for in orbit assembly missions. As a use case, the researchers tested the robot for the assembly of a 25-meter large aperture space telescope, last assembling telescope in orbit ever since the launch of the Hubble Space Telescope and its successor, the James Webb Space Telescope. The space community has been continuously moving towards deploying newer and large telescopes with larger apertures, the diameter of the light collecting region. Assembling such a telescope, such as 25-meter large on Earth, is not possible with our current launch vehicles due to their limited size. That is why larger telescopes ideally need to be assembled in space or in orbit. The prospect of in orbit commissioning of a large has fueled scientific and commercial interest in deep space astronomy and Earth observation, said Nair. To assemble a telescope of that magnitude in space, we need the right tools. Nair explains, although conventional space walking robotic candidates are dexterous, they are constrained in man- maneuverability. Therefore, it is significant for future in orbit walking robot designs to incorporate mobility features to offer access to a much larger workspace without compromising the dexterity. E-Walker robot. The researcher proposed a 7 degree of freedom, dexterous and over and walking robot, a limited robotic system that can move along a surface to a different location to perform tasks with 7 degrees of motion capabilities, or in short, an e-walker. They conducted an in-depth design engineering exercise to test the robot for its capability to eff- efficiently assemble a 25-meter launch in orbit. The robot was compared to the existing Canadium 2 and the Canadium and the European robotic arm on the International Space Station. Additionally, a scaled down prototype for Earth analog testing was developed and another design engineering exercise performed. Our analysis shows that the proposed innovative e-walker design proves to be versatile and an ideal candidate for future in-orbit mission. The e-walker would be able to extend the life cycle of a mission by carrying out routine maintenance and serving missions post assembly in space, explained Nair. The analysis of the scaled down prototype identifies it to also be an ideal candidate for serving maintenance and assembly operation on Earth, such as carrying out regular maintenance checks on wind turbines. Yet a lot remains to be explored. The researcher was limited to the design engineer analysis of a full-scale prototype model of the Evoker near explained. The Evoker prototyping work is now in progress at the University of Lincoln. Therefore, the experimental verification and validation will be published separately. So these are the things, these are the findings, that how we are that how we can revolutionize the thing in space, to build those things in the space itself, or not on the ground or on the mother earth, of course. So yep, I mean, great finding. Sorry, not the great finding, great initiative. Yep. Okay. As I previously discussed in many of the podcasts that we have started a newsletter for you guys, providing you the information that is not easily available on the surface web. So if you are interested in that kind of information, please subscribe to this newsletter. Otherwise, listening to this podcast will be enough for you guys. And yes, at the end, I just want to say, you guys, keep researching, stay curious, stay healthy.